Everyone, welcome to Biosite. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about one of the topics from class 11 biology, the living world. So in this lecture, I am going to give a brief synopsis or glance of this chapter so which you can understand more efficiently and you can note the important points while listening to this lecture. Let's start today's lecture. So as the chapter suggests, we need to understand what is living. So, living is nothing but a life of an organism. Life is an unique, complex organization of molecules expressing itself through chemical reactions, which leads to growth, development, and responsiveness, adaptation, and reproduction. So, if the organism is supposed to be living, it must show its growth and development and responsiveness towards the environment and its adaptations to survive in this earth and reproduction capability to extend its generation. So, life is recognized by more of its working, which includes some unified basic characteristics. Living organisms are evolving, self-replicating and self-regulating interactive systems capable of responding to external stimuli. So which means this is a brief introduction of what is living. So here there are few important characteristics which we can differentiate between the living organisms as well as non-living organisms. So whatever the organism on the earth, it must exhibit few unique characteristics which make it unique from the other living organisms. Likewise, there are few important characteristics of the living beings which differentiate them from the non-living things of the earth. Let's discuss them. So the very first characteristic of an living organism is growth. So the all living beings grow. Increase in the growth can be understood in two ways: increase in mass and increase in number of cells, or twin characteristics of the growth. If you take in case of unicellular organism, the growth can be understood by increasing size and mass, where in case of multicellular organisms, the growth can be characterized by the increase in number of the cells. So if you take unicellular organisms, the cells increase in cell size refers to the growth, while in case of multicellular organisms or eukaryotes like plants and animals, the growth is characterized by the cell division. So the cell divides continuously throughout their lifespan and therefore it is indefinite. So in plants and animals, we can see the growth as the division of cells. So what the growth can be understood in case of non-living objects if you take increase in body mass as a criteria of growth, but in this object's extrinsic growth is present, that is increase in mass of the body from outside, example mountain, boulders and sand mounds. So if you take non-living object perspective, the increase in their mass and size is referred to as a growth. But growth therefore cannot be taken as a defining property of living organism, defining property of the living organism. So there must be other kind of characteristics which we need to consider in order to differentiate the living organisms from the non-living things, as they have mentioned that the growth can be shown in both living and non-living things. In case of living, increase in mass, increase in cell size and increase in cell number refers to a growth, but this kind of characteristics may be shown by the non-living objects like mountains. So in order to break this confusion, uh, we need to take other characteristics into terms. So the second most important characteristic of living organism is reproduction. So reproduction is nothing but production of progeny possessing features more or less similar to the of the parents. So reproduction is nothing but production of progeny, production of offsprings which are similar to their parents. So the organisms do reproduce, especially the living organism reproduce through asexually as well as sexually. So there are different methods of asexual reproduction in different forms of organism. So reproduction is synonymous with growth in unicellular organism, that is increase in number of cells is equivalent to reproduction. In case of unicellular organisms, further there are some organisms which do not reproduce at all. One is worker bees and mules. Hence, reproduction also cannot be an inclusive property of living organism. So there are some organisms like worker bees and mules which are actually living, but due to their incapability to reproduce, we can't exactly take the example of these organisms for this characteristic. So that's why reproduction is not a single characteristics which we need to take into terms. So there are some other characteristics which we need to understand. Third one. So ultimately we have to take the consideration of growth and reproduction as well. The living organisms must show growth in their lifetime as well as they could be able to reproduce. Exceptions to few organisms is present, still we need to take these two factors into terms. So apart from these two factors, we need to understand or consider other factors like metabolism. So, metabolism is defined as sum total of all chemical reactions taking place in the body of an organism. So, metabolism is a characteristic which enable the organism to survive. So, it is nothing but a sum total of all chemical reactions taking place in the body of an organism, which are nothing but digestion, respiration, excretion, circulation. This all together comes under the metabolism. So these are the metabolism. So these are the processes, life processes, which enable the organism to survive. So some of the chemical reactions are constructive, known as anabolic, whereas others are destructive. If you take the example of digestion, it is purely catabolic process in which the complex molecules are digested or broken down to simple molecules, which is nothing but catabolism. So in case of anabolism, it is quite constructive. So the combination of catabolism and anabolism constitutes metabolism. So if the organism show metabolism, it is considered to be a living being. So all living beings show metabolism, but in non-living object, this feature is absent. So this is the ultimate statement. So till now we have seen the growth and reproduction in growth in case of non-living beings and reproduction incapability in some organisms. So to break this confusion, the ultimate characteristic which we need to consider is metabolism. So the living organisms only show metabolism, where the non-living objects won't show metabolism. So metabolic reaction can be demonstrated outside the body in cell-free systems. So an isolated metabolic reaction in a test tube is neither living nor non-living. Hence, well, metabolism is a defining feature of all living organisms without exception. So we need to consider that all living organisms show metabolism. So this is one important point. And the number four is consciousness. So consciousness is nothing but the ability of an organism to respond or to show stimuli towards the external environment. So all living organisms do respond to the external stimuli. The response given by an organism to the stimulus is called as consciousness. So it is because of the presence of either nervous system or some sensory structures in different forms of life. If you take the example of humans, are the only organisms which have the self consciousness, and this consciousness becomes the defining property of the living beings. So self consciousness is a phenomena in which the organism shows some senses to take care of itself, to be saved from the predators, and to uh, aspiring to survive on the earth. So the living organism do show the consciousness, while the non-living organism don't show any consciousness. So diversity in the living world, biodiversity biodiversity. So the predicted number of total species on the earth is about 5 to 50 million, and average number is 14 million, and the number of taxonomically known species ranges between 1.7 to 1.8 million. So this includes nearly 1.2 million animals and over 0.5 million species of plants. Amongst animals, insects form the largest group, that is 10 lakh 25,000 species are there. Every year, known or discovered number of species is about 15,000. This is the important taxonomical count of the living organisms on the earth. You can make a note of it. So what is the need for classification? So as the earth is covered with bulk of living organisms, from microorganisms to well developed humans, so we need to understand, for the better understanding of the living organisms and the mode of living, their structural and functional organizations, their characteristics and their complexity, we need to classify them to study. So there are millions of plants and animals varying greatly in the form, structure and complexity. It is impossible to study all of them individually. So to make the study of the organism possible and easier, we need to divide. The scientists have divided the organisms into different ranks, categories on the basis of similarities and differences. So So the classification of the organisms into groups or subgroups depending on extent of similarities and differences is called as classification. So what are the advantages of classification? So it gives an clear idea about and diversity of the organism, and throws light on the origin of organism, and gives an information about the evolutionary interrelationships between the organisms. By studying one member of a group, a broad idea regarding all organisms of the group can be obtained. So it will be useful in every field like agriculture, forestry, industry, to know bioresources and diversity. Let's see what is taxonomy. So, taxonomy is a branch of science dealing with the study of principles, procedures for the classification of organisms. And there are components of taxonomy are characterization, in which we need to determine or understand the character of an organism. After characterization, we need to identify which kind of organism is it, and after identification we need to name the organism under nomenclature, and we need to classify them finally. So these are the four components of the taxonomy. Here term comes systematic. Systematic is the term given by Carolus von Linnaeus, and study of diversity of organism and the comparative and evolutionary relationship. So systematics is basically a book, a term given by the Carolus von Linnaeus, and it shows the study of diversity of organisms and their comparative evolutionary relationships. So it is taxonomy plus phylogeny. So phylogeny is the evolutionary history of organisms. Phylogeny shows the evolutionary history of organisms, with the taxonomy shows the characterization, identification, nomenclature and classification of the living organism. So let's see what is nomenclature. How do we name the organism? So basically there are two kinds of names given to the organism. One is vernacular name, which is known given in local language, varies from place to place, and this vernacular name is not universal. It is also known as a common name. So the second one is the scientific name, which is universal name of the organism. So this scientific name is given to the organism based upon the definite rules and criteria of binomial nomenclature. It follows the binomial nomenclature mode of system, and this binomial nomenclature system was given by Carolus Linnaeus. And some important rules of nomenclature are, so the biological names are generally in Latin and written in italics. So they are Latinized or derived from Latin irrespective of their origin. The first word in a biological name represents the genus, where the second component denotes the specific epithet or species. So both the words in a biological name when handwritten are separately underlined or printed in italics to indicate the Latin origin. The first word denoting the genus starts with a capital letter, and the specific epithet starts with a small letter. For example, if you take the example of the garden pea, which is the common name or vernacular name, the scientific name will be the Pisum sativum. So, Pisum, this is the genus, and sativum is the species. As you can see, the genus starts with the capital letter, species starts with a small letter. In brackets, the L represents the name of the scientist who gave the name. So, Linnaeus gave some principles of the binomial nomenclature in Phil- Philosophia Botanica, but the nomenclature was used first in Species Plantarum, where the names and description of 5,900 species of the plants were given. Later, he published a Systema Naturae, where 4,326 species of animals were described. So the Linnaeus do follow this binomial nomenclature system in his respective books, and the standardization of scientific names is provided by ICBN, International Code for Botanical Nomenclature; ICZN, International Code for Zoological Nomenclature; ICNB, International Code for Nomenclature of Bacteria; and ICNCP, International Code of Nomenclature for Cultivated Plants; ICTV, International Committee for the Taxonomy of Viruses. So let's see the taxonomic hierarchy, the arrangement. So the classification is not a single step process. It involves hierarchy of steps in which each step represents a rank or category. The category is a part of overall taxonomic arrangement. So it is known as a taxonomic category. All the categories together represents the taxonomic hierarchy. The first given by Linnaeus, who introduced the five ranks, that is class, order, genus, species, variety, from upper to lower. Later on, three new categories, kingdom, division or phylum and family, were added, and variety was removed. And this taxonomical hierarchy contains 7 obligate categories and about 21 intermediate categories. The 7 obligate categories are division, class, order, family, genus, species, from higher to lower. So these are the 7 taxonomic categories. So this is the brief introduction of the living world, the characteristics of living organisms, about the classification. So now let's see the taxonomical hierarchy which was given by the scientist. So let's see the species. Species was a term given by the scientist John Ray. It is the lowest category of the classification. So if you see this order, remember this order, the division is the highest or very first hierarchy, very first category, 7 obligate categories of the kingdom, division comes the higher and the species comes the lower. Let's understand from the lower. So the species is the term given by John Ray. It was the lowest category of classification. It is nothing but a group of closely related individual species with similar morphological and anatomical and biochemical and cytological characters. So they must be naturally interbreeding population with the ability to produce fertile offsprings and should share the common gene pool. So this comes under the species. So it is reproductive isolated, thus genetically closed systems. For example, Pisum sativum, pea plant, Mangifera indica, mango, Solanum tuberosum, potato, Homo sapiens, human beings. So in this uh, scientific names, you can observe that sativum, indica, tuberosum, leo, sapiens are nothing but represents the species specific epithet. So change in this specific epithet totally change the a species. So this Pisum, Mangifera, Solanum, Panthera and Homo represents the genus. So what is genus here? It is the group of related species which has more characters in a common in comparison to species of other genera. So potato, brinjal and three different species belonging to the same genus Solanum which are sharing the common characters. Lion, leopard, and tiger with several common features belong to the same genus Panthera. Next, family. So, family is nothing but it is a group of related genera with still less number of similarities as compared to genus and species. So, these are categorized on the basis of both vegetative reproductive features of plants. So, four related genera Solanum, Petunia, Datura, Atropa belong to the family Solanaceae, and genus Panthera and Felis are put together in the family Felidae. Order. So, order is nothing but is a group of related families which exhibit few similar characters. Similar characters are less in number as compared to different genera included in the family. So, plant families like Convolvulaceae and Solanaceae are included in the order Polymonaales, mainly based on floral characters. And animals order Carnivora includes families like Felidae and Canidae. So it is a if you can observe here in whatever the families always ends with the suffix ac, which means family. So class or nothing but is a group of related orders. Plants order like Sapindales and Polymoniales are included in the class Dicotyledonnae. In animals order Primata and Carnivora are included in the class Mammalia. So phylum, it is a group of related classes, and the phylum Chordata of animals contain not only the class Mammalia but also aves. We have the phylums aves, reptiles, amphibians, fishes, which represents the related classes. And kingdom, it is the highest category in the hierarchy with all the related phyla or divisions. So kingdom Animalia includes all animals belong to different phyla, and Plantae. We have two kinds of kingdom, Plantae and Animalia represents the different categories of plants and animals. So let's see a tabular form for the better understanding. So if you take the example, common name of the man, the biological name is Homo sapiens, genus is Homo, family is Hominidae, and order Primata, class Mammalia, and phylum is Chordata. So these are the three other examples. If you take mango, so Mangifera indica is the biological name or scientific name. Genus is Mangifera. Family Anacardiaceae. order Sapendae, class Dicotyledonnae, and the phylum Angiospermae. So this is how you categorize the living organisms. So higher the category, higher the number of organism and lesser the number of common characters. This is the key point to remember. So there are biological concept of species given by Ernst Mayr and is based upon the reproductive isolation. So there are some taxonomic aids for this study. The one is herbarium. It is defined as a storehouse of collected plant specimens that are dried, pressed, and preserved on sheets. So herbaria also serve as quick referral system in taxonomic studies. And the steps to prepare herbarium is the collection of the plants, their drying, poisoning, mounting, stitching, labeling, and deposition. So you can collect them are kept inside the metallic vasculum or polythene bags. So poisoning is done by using 0.1% mercury chloride, and the international size of herbarium sheet is 49 into 29 centimeters. The paper size where you can press the plants. So the greatest herbarium of the world is Herbarium of the Royal Botanical Garden, which is in Kew, England, having more than 6 million specimens. And the largest herbarium of India is the Central National Herbarium, which is in Kolkata, having 20 lakh specimens. And we have the botanical gardens for the study. So it comes under the excited conservation strategies and records of local flora of monographic work and identification purpose. The Royal Botanical Garden, Kew, England, the Indian Botanical Garden, Kolkata, National Botanical Research Institute, Lucknow. So these are the few important botanical gardens, and we have the museums for the preservation of succulent plants and other specimens. So plants and animal specimens may also be preserved as dry specimens, and insects are preserved in insect boxes after collecting, killing, and pinning them. So in case of animals, we have the geological parks. National Geological Park, Delhi, is one of the finest zoo of Asia, and largest zoo of the world is Kruger, which is in South Africa. So this taxonomical aids used for the identification of plants and animals based upon the similarities and dissimilarities is called a taxonomic key. It is based on the set of contrasting characters known as a couplet, whereby each statement of couplet is called as a lead, and separate taxonomic keys are required for each taxonomic category. Keys are generally analytical in nature. So we have flora manuals, monographs, and catalogs for the better study of the species. And the flora contains the actual account of habitat distribution of plants of a given area. This provides the index of the plant species found in the particular area. In case of manuals, so manuals provide the complete listing and description of the plant growing in a particular area, and monographs provide information on any one taxon, and catalogs includes the alphabetical arrangement of species describing their features. So this is all about a glance or synopsis of the chapter The Living World. I hope you understand this lecture. Thank you for watching.